What does it say when even a first-class ticket isn't enough to prove you belong? The first thing to understand about Marcus Ellison is that he's never walked into a room seeking approval. At 46, after turning a modest shipping startup into a billion-dollar logistics empire, he's long known the reality. The double takes, the doubts, the silent calculations, they don't disappear with success. They just wear different faces depending on the setting. And today, those old familiar signals are waiting for him at Gate A27 in Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. The boarding line crawls forward, families fumbling with strollers, business types glued to their screens, retirees digging through oversized handbags for wrinkled boarding passes. Marcus stands composed, dressed in a sharply tailored navy blazer, leather briefcase in one hand, boarding pass in the other. He doesn't call attention to himself. He doesn't need to. He's en route to Dallas to seal a deal that could reshape West Coast freight movement, and he intends to do it in style. First class to Dallas is now boarding, comes the gate agent's voice. Marcus steps forward with quiet purpose, scans his pass, and offers the agent a courteous smile. Everything's smooth until he enters the plane. That's when the shift happens. A flight attendant with perfectly pinned hair and a tight-lipped smile scans him head to toe. Her eyes rest a moment too long on his brown skin, then flick to his well-worn carry-on. "Sir," she says, voice clipped, "this area is reserved for first-class passengers." Marcus blinks. He glances at the glowing 2A on his ticket. No need to argue. No need to raise his voice. "I am in first class," he says evenly. "That's my seat right there." But she doesn't move. Her smile tightens like a drawstring. "Sir, I believe you're mistaken. Coach is just down that way." The words aren't new. They're never new. They say the same thing every time. You don't belong here. Marcus could fight it. He could lose his temper. Instead, he lets the silence do the heavy lifting. He meets her eyes, steady and calm, like a man who knows exactly where he belongs and isn't about to explain it twice. Behind him, someone clears his throat. A man in a gray suit steps up and, without so much as a glance, slides into seat 2A. "That's actually my seat," the man says casually. Marcus turns back to the attendant. "That's my seat," he says again, this time with a quiet firmness that could bend steel. She doesn't even look at her list. "Sir, please don't make this more difficult," she says, her tone less about assistance and more about removal. The space around Marcus feels like it's shrinking. All eyes seem to lock on him. He's not blocking the aisle. He's just standing his ground. Holding up his boarding pass inches from her face, he says, "2A. That's what it says. That's where I'm sitting." Still, she refuses to look. Folding her arms, she adds, "I understand, but the gentleman is already seated. Let's get you a spot in coach so boarding can continue." She says it like she's doing him a favor. Meanwhile, the man in 2A hasn't even acknowledged the situation. He stretches out, fastens his belt, and disappears into his phone, claiming the seat like it was carved with his initials. Marcus stays composed. "You didn't ask him for his ticket," he says. "You didn't verify anything. You just assumed I was in the wrong." A ripple of awareness moves through the rows nearby. A young woman in 2C lowers her magazine. A father whispers something to his teenage son, whose brow furrows. The tension in the cabin thickens. The attendant's smile has vanished now, replaced with irritation. "Sir, you're holding up the line. Please move along." Marcus thinks about just sitting anywhere, taking the hit. But then he catches the teenager watching him, eyes sharp, studying whether a grown man will trade his dignity for convenience. And in that moment, he knows he can't walk away. He leans slightly toward the man in 2A. "Let me see your ticket." The man glances up, unimpressed. "Look, buddy, this isn't that serious. You'll get a seat. Don't mess up the flight for everyone." Buddy. That word lands heavy. Marcus feels the heat rise behind his collar. Still, he doesn't lose control. He straightens and replies, voice even and full of quiet power. "You're in my seat. You know it. I know it. And she knows it too." The attendant stiffens. "Sir, lower your voice." I haven't raised it, Marcus says. And the way he says it, controlled, precise, carries more weight than any shout could. The boarding line has stalled. People shift uncomfortably. Then the woman in 2C speaks up. He showed you his ticket. That's his seat. Why haven't you checked it? The father nods. She's right. Just look at the list. But the attendant stays rooted. She scribbles something on her tablet and says coldly, "Security can handle this if necessary." The threat hangs there, quiet but loud. Passengers glance around, unsettled. Marcus doesn't flinch. He calmly pulls out his phone, scrolls to the photo app, and snaps a picture of his boarding pass. His voice is steady. "I'll wait." The attendant stares at him for a long, uncomfortable moment before motioning toward a fold-down jump seat near the galley. "You can sit there while we sort this out," she says curtly. Marcus Ellison doesn't even glance at it. "That's not the seat I paid for." Her silence after that says more than words could. Even the man in the gray suit begins to squirm slightly, the confidence in his posture fading. He clears his throat, suddenly unsure. "All right, maybe I'm in the wrong row." With a huff and a mutter, "Unbelievable," he stands and shuffles back to 3A, acting like he's doing the entire flight a favor. The flight attendant still doesn't apologize. She merely gestures dismissively toward 2A. "Take your seat, sir. We need to keep boarding." Marcus slides into his seat, but the sting of the moment lingers. From the seat beside him, the young woman in 2C leans in, voice barely above a whisper. "I saw the whole thing. That wasn't right." He nods once, lips pressed into a tight line. He's been through enough of these moments to know this won't be the last. As the cabin door thunks shut and the aircraft begins to taxi, Marcus is already calculating his next move. Because this time, he has something most people in his position never do: real authority and the ability to change the narrative before wheels even leave the ground. From the outside, the first-class cabin looks peaceful. Muted lights, sleek leather seats, the occasional rustle of a newspaper. But underneath that quiet surface, the air is charged. Everyone saw what happened. And now, in their own quiet way, every passenger is deciding what it means. Claire Donnelly, the young woman next to Marcus, keeps sneaking glances at him. She fiddles with her water bottle cap, her lips pressed together as if debating whether to speak again. She doesn't want to stir the pot, but what she witnessed won't let her sit still. Across the aisle, Victor Hale leans closer to his teenage son. "You see that?" he whispers. His son, Jonah, nods slowly. "That's what I was telling you about," Victor murmurs. "Sometimes, people won't give you the respect you've earned. You have to decide how you'll respond." Jonah frowns. "But he had the ticket. Why didn't she just check?" Victor sighs. "Because some people don't look at what's in front of them. They only see what they expect to see." Not everyone shares that clarity. 2 rows back, a middle-aged couple mumbles between themselves. The woman shakes her head. "He should have just sat in coach and avoided all the fuss." Her husband shrugs. "Maybe he was in the wrong. We don't know the full story." Their voices are soft, but Marcus hears every word. He doesn't turn, doesn't correct them, doesn't explain. He's learned. There's no use trying to persuade people who've already decided not to see you. Back in 2C, Claire finally leans across the armrest, voice barely a whisper. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. That wasn't right." Marcus gives a small nod. "Appreciate that. But I'm used to it." "Used to it?" she echoes, disbelief written across her face. He meets her eyes. "Happens more than you'd think." There's no anger behind his words, just quiet truth. The same flight attendant walks briskly past with a tray of drinks, eyes avoiding Marcus like he's invisible. He doesn't watch her go, doesn't seek acknowledgement. Instead, he loosens his tie and opens his briefcase. If she won't face the mistake, he won't chase an apology. But Jonah isn't done processing. The teenager keeps glancing over. Finally, he blurts out, "That was messed up." His dad hushes him, but Marcus turns slightly, offering a faint smile. "Thanks, kid." Not everyone is brave enough to say what they're thinking. Jonah shrugs awkwardly. "My mom says, if something's wrong, you speak up." That line lands heavier than any silence could. Simple, honest, real. And for the first time since stepping onto the plane, Marcus feels something shift. Not in the atmosphere. In himself. Respect. Still, the tension hasn't gone anywhere. It clings to the cabin, unseen but suffocating. Passengers sip drinks and scroll their phones, pretending they didn't just watch a man get profiled in real time. Then the seatbelt sign dings. Engines begin their low rumble down the taxiway. Marcus knows this isn't over. Not even close. Because in just 12 minutes, this entire flight is going to take a turn no one expects. The plane edges forward under the fading Arizona sky, blinking lights reflected on the tarmac. Marcus stays motionless in seat 2A, hands resting lightly on his knees. To the average eye, he looks relaxed, maybe even bored. But inside, his mind is turning, sharpening. He doesn't hit the call button, doesn't demand attention, because he knows losing control is the fastest way to lose power. Instead, he reclines ever so slightly and exhales. Let them underestimate him. Claire watches him curiously. "You're really not going to say anything else?" she asks softly. Marcus shakes his head. "I already said what needed to be said." Jonah, still fired up from earlier, leans over again. "But they treated you wrong. Shouldn't you, I don't know, complain?" Marcus tilts his head toward the boy. "And what do you think would happen if I raised my voice right now? If I pushed too hard?" Jonah pauses. "They'd probably say you're causing a problem." "Exactly." Marcus gives a small nod, like a teacher who just walked a student to the answer. Sometimes the strongest move is giving them the opposite of what they expect. His words settle over the boy like a weighted blanket. Lesson learned, without ever raising a voice. Across the aisle, Victor watches quietly. Victor Hale recognizes it instantly. That quiet resilience, the kind you inherit, not learn. That ability to hold your position without ever raising your voice or lifting a finger. It reminds him of his own father. Meanwhile, Marcus Ellison shifts his gaze to the window. The runway stretches out in disciplined rows of glowing amber lights, each one bleeding into dusk like a quiet promise. A memory surfaces, years back, a different airport, same uneasy feeling. He'd been pulled aside at security, watched his younger, less experienced, white colleagues breeze through without so much as a glance. Later, they laughed, chalked it up to random screening. Protocol, they called it. He'd smiled too, swallowed the shame, but the sting never really faded. What's happening now feels familiar. But this time, it's amplified. And this time, he isn't powerless. Next to him, Claire Donnelly notices the way his expression turns distant. "You've been through this before, haven't you?" she asks gently. Marcus doesn't sugarcoat it. "More times than I can count." She bites her lip, guilt pressing into her expression, though she's not the one who caused the harm. That's not right. He finally turns to her, voice quiet but grounded. "Fairness doesn't come standard. You either let the world break you, or you figure out how to bend it back." Before she can answer, the overhead intercom crackles to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for takeoff," the captain announces with calm, practiced ease. "Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin." The same attendant who tried to reroute him to coach now passes through, checking seat belts, avoiding his eyes like he's air. Marcus doesn't flinch. He doesn't confront her. Instead, he lifts his phone, tilts it slightly toward the aisle, and with a few measured taps, types out a message. Then he slides the phone back into his pocket, face unreadable. Claire notices. "What was that?" she asks softly. He doesn't answer right away. Leaning back in his seat, he folds his arms and closes his eyes, like a man perfectly at peace with waiting. When he finally responds, his tone is almost casual. "Let's just say, this flight's about to get very inconvenient for the people in charge." Jonah Hale perks up, wide-eyed. "What do you mean?" Marcus opens one eye, just enough to meet the boy's gaze. "You'll see." As the engines rumble louder and the aircraft rolls forward, most passengers brace for takeoff, unaware that a single silent call has already set the next chapter into motion. The wheels ease onto the runway with a familiar bump. That hush, the one that always comes right before liftoff, settles across the cabin. For most, it's just another routine ascent. But for Marcus, this is when the countdown begins. He glances at his watch. 12 minutes. That's how long it'll take before the ripple he started returns full circle to this very cockpit. The call wasn't long, wasn't emotional. It didn't need to be. Just a quick, clipped instruction to his chief of staff, an assistant who knows better than to ask questions. There's a situation. Call the airline CEO. Make sure they know who's on this plane. That was it. Short words. Heavy consequences. Behind those few sentences sit multi-million-dollar partnerships, long-standing contracts, and enough economic weight to move boardrooms. Careers can rise or crumble off what happens next. The jet engines roar, pressing bodies back into headrests. Claire grips the armrest. Jonah watches Marcus instead of the sky. What's going to happen? The boy whispers. Marcus keeps his gaze ahead. Depends on how quickly people decide to listen. Victor tilts his head. What do you mean? Marcus doesn't rush to answer. He observes, taking in the humming lights overhead, the tightened faces of the crew, the quiet pretense of normalcy. Then he leans forward just a touch. Voice low. Steady. Let's just say this airline relies on me far more than I rely on them. Victor doesn't ask more. He doesn't have to. He recognizes a man who moves with purpose and who doesn't make empty threats. Outside, Phoenix slips into miniature, a spread of glowing dots beneath them. The ascent is smooth. Easy. But Marcus clocks every second. He's not just watching the sky. He's tracking the system, waiting for the pivot point. 2 rows back, the couple who gossiped earlier now sip champagne, clueless about the reckoning moving silently in their direction. The man in the gray suit, still scrolling through his phone, earbuds in, utterly untouched by the disruption he caused. Finally, the flight attendant returns. Her voice clipped, professional. Can I get you something to drink, sir? The sir rings false. Everyone hears it, especially Marcus. He doesn't look at her. No, thank you. She moves on, color creeping into her cheeks despite her effort to appear unfazed. Claire watches the exchange closely. Do you think she realizes what she did? She whispers. Marcus gives a slow shake of his head. Most people don't, until the consequences show up. Jonah leans in, eyes alert. And you're making sure they do. This time, Marcus does glance at him, just enough to flash a hint of a smile. Let's call it accountability. The intercom chimes again. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be reaching cruising altitude shortly. Flight attendants, you may begin in-flight service. But as those words play, a quiet alert pings in the cockpit. The captain glances down. His phone vibrates on the control panel, its screen flashing with a message from the CEO's office. Across from him, the co-pilot leans over, eyebrows raised. Is that from headquarters? The captain reads the message again, jaw tightening with each word. He casts a brief glance over his shoulder toward the locked cabin door, then toward his co-pilot. Looks like we've got a problem, he mutters. In first class, Marcus Ellison opens his briefcase with practiced ease, slides out a file, and flips it open. To the casual observer, he looks like any high-level executive passing the time. But beneath that polished surface, he knows the power has already shifted. The plane may be airborne, but control is already grounded elsewhere. The fastened seatbelt light flicks off, and passengers ease into what they assume will be a routine flight. The crew has no clue that within minutes, their evening, and for some, their careers, are about to be rewritten. The captain's eyes remain locked on the cockpit screen. The message is short, urgent, final. Return to gate immediately. Do not delay. CEO order. The co-pilot frowns. We just left the ground. What is this even about? The captain exhales slowly, rubbing at his temple. It means someone important is on board. Someone we can't afford to get this wrong with. Back in the cabin, everything still looks normal. Beverage carts roll down the aisle. Laughter hums in low pockets. Claire Donnelly sips from her sparkling water, finally starting to relax. Jonah Hale leans back in his seat, though his eyes never stray far from Marcus. The man in the gray suit remains glued to his phone, smug and unaware. 2 rows back, the couple who judged Marcus earlier giggle over a private joke, blissfully out of sync with the tension brewing. Then, a soft tone chimes overhead. The flight attendants pick up their receivers. Not the woman who confronted Marcus, but her colleague, a younger attendant, pauses mid-step, eyes going wide. She turns to another crew member, whispering. They've been together, whispering like kids caught cheating on a test. The intercom clicks. The captain's voice is steady, but beneath it is a weight few passengers recognize. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed to return to the gate at Sky Harbor. Please remain seated as we coordinate with ground control. Thank you for your cooperation. A ripple of confusion rolls through the cabin. People shift. Murmurs rise. Curious glances dart across aisles. Claire stiffens in her seat. Wait, we're turning back. Jonah lights up, half whispering to Marcus. This is about you, isn't it? Marcus doesn't look up, still flipping pages in his file. Maybe. The man in the gray suit removes an earbud, clearly annoyed. What now? Mechanical issue? He asks the air. No one answers him. The attendants are suddenly moving fast, locking carts, tightening headsets. The woman from earlier avoids Marcus's row completely, vanishing into the galley like she never existed. Claire leans toward him, eyes searching his face. You did this, didn't you? Marcus closes the folder, finally meeting her gaze. His voice is calm, controlled. Sometimes the only way to teach respect is to remind people what they stand to lose. She studies him, looking for ego. There's none, just quiet certainty. Jonah grins. This is like a movie. His father places a steady hand on his shoulder. No, son, this isn't a movie. This is what it looks like when power's used with purpose. The descent back to Phoenix is quick. The city lights swell beneath them, drawing closer with every passing second. Anxiety builds across the rows. Passengers glance around, trying to guess the emergency. Medical issue? Security concern? No one even considers the truth, that the fate of this crew rests in the hands of the man seated quietly in 2A. The wheels touch down with a thud. A deeper hush settles, heavier than the landing itself. The plane taxis slowly, crawling toward the gate like it knows what's waiting. Eventually, the seatbelt sign dings. The intercom comes alive again, this time with strain in the voice. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated until further notice. Groans ripple through the cabin. The man in the gray suit huffs. Ridiculous. What a waste of time. Then, movement. The cabin door opens. 2 airline executives step aboard, their suits sharp, their faces tighter than their ties. A uniformed airport security officer follows close behind. They don't glance at passengers. Their eyes go straight to the cockpit, then shift toward the galley. To her, the attendant who tried to send Marcus to coach. One of the executives leans in close, whispers something. Her face crumbles. She tries to respond, but he raises a hand to stop her. The second executive heads toward the cockpit. Moments later, the pilot emerges, jaw set, his face drawn tight. Someone near the back blurts out, "Wait, are they firing the pilot?" No one replies. The air is thick. Seconds stretch, feel longer than the entire flight. Marcus sits quietly in 2A, legs crossed, eyes unreadable. He doesn't gloat, doesn't smile. He watches, like a man observing a conclusion he already knew was coming. As clipped words pass between the executives and the crew, one thing becomes undeniable. This flight was never just about reaching a destination. It became about something else entirely, accountability. And the reckoning has just begun. The only sounds left are the hum of air vents and the low creak of shifting weight as every passenger leans in, straining to catch fragments of the unfolding conversation. The tall executive with the clipped tone points firmly toward the galley. "Step aside," he says. And this time, there's no argument. She opens her mouth to argue, but the words come out fractured. I was just trying to manage it. The executive cuts her off with a tone so sharp it slices through the cabin air. You'll have the opportunity to explain yourself later. For now, gather your things. Gasps ripple through the rows. Claire Donnelly instinctively covers her mouth. Jonah Hale's eyes go wide, fixed on the unfolding drama like it's the final act of a movie he didn't realize he was watching. The attendant's face drains of color. You can't just. But the second executive, a woman with a commanding presence, steps in without hesitation. We can. And we are, she says flatly. You've embarrassed this company. And you've put a partnership at risk, one we cannot afford to lose. Her voice wasn't meant to carry, but in the charged stillness of the cabin, every passenger hears her. The flight attendant turns toward Marcus Ellison, her lips trembling now. The arrogance she wore so easily earlier has vanished, replaced with something closer to panic. Marcus doesn't blink. He doesn't gloat. He simply looks at her the way he did when he first showed her his boarding pass, steady, unmoved, and completely in control. Then the pilot steps out of the cockpit, cap tucked under his arm, eyes shadowed with concern. He approaches the executives, speaking low but urgent. I've been flying planes for over 20 years. You can't ground me mid-shift like this. The first executive's voice is cold. We can. Orders came from the top. You've been briefed. This isn't up for discussion. The pilot stiffens, a wave of disbelief flashing across his features. He glances toward first class, and in that moment, his eyes meet Marcus's. The realization hits. Only now does he seem to understand who he was really flying across the sky. A low murmur begins to roll through the cabin. What's going on? A man in the back calls out. Why are they pulling the pilot? No one answers. But everyone can feel it. This entire moment, every decision, every consequence, traces back to the man in seat 2A. Jonah leans in, voice hushed and awestruck. He really did this. Claire nods slowly, eyes still fixed on Marcus. Yeah, he did. The pilot mutters something under his breath and brushes past the executives. The attendant follows behind, her expression spinning from fear to disbelief. Together, they step off the plane, leaving behind a silence so complete it almost hums. The first executive straightens his tie, steps forward, and addresses the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely apologize for this delay. Your new flight crew will arrive shortly, and we'll be back on our way. Thank you for your patience. The words are practiced, polished, but no one misses the gravity underneath. Marcus closes his briefcase with finality. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The lesson is already written across the faces around him. Victor Hale leans toward Jonah and whispers, "Remember this moment. This is what it looks like when a man refuses to be disrespected." Around the cabin, the atmosphere shifts. It's not just relief. It's reflection. But one truth still hangs heavier than everything else. This isn't over. The fallout is only beginning. And by the time this flight touches down again, every person here will leave with a story they'll never forget. The cabin door thuds shut behind the pilot and attendant, sealing their exit like a punctuation mark. A hush lingers. Not just quiet, reverent. Like everyone knows they witnessed something bigger than a flight delay. Claire leans across the aisle. She looked like she wanted to say something to you before she left. Marcus doesn't lift his head from the folder on his lap. She had plenty of chances. Words don't mean much when they come without respect. Jonah speaks up again, louder this time. But you got her fired. And the pilot too. Don't you feel bad? Victor shoots him a look, but Marcus doesn't bristle. He just breathes in slow, measured. Actions have consequences, he says calmly. Sometimes they take years to catch up. Tonight, they came fast. Jonah frowns, uncertain. So you didn't do it just to get even? Marcus finally looks at him. Eyes focused, voice clear. No. Retaliation's about proving a point. Accountability? That's about teaching one. The boy sits with that, his brow furrowed in quiet thought. Victor places a hand on his son's shoulder, as if to seal the moment into memory. All around them, passengers are processing in their own ways. The couple who scoffed earlier now sit rigid, unable to look Marcus in the eye. The man in the gray suit sinks into his seat, smaller now than when he first boarded. And Claire, taking it all in, feels something settle in her chest. Not just respect, conviction. Something she knows she'll carry long after this flight ends. Minutes later, the new crew boards, fresh-faced, courteous, moving with purpose. Their tone is different, warmer, measured. They speak to passengers with care. The contrast is unmistakable. One stops beside Marcus's seat. "Mr. Ellison, is there anything we can do to make you more comfortable?" He shakes his head. "No, just treat everyone on this plane the way they deserve to be treated. That's enough." The attendant nods, clearly impacted, and moves on. Claire leans in once more. "Do you always handle things like that?" Marcus gives her a faint smile. "Not always. But with time, you learn something important. Respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you expect." He pauses, then adds, voice steady. "And when it's denied, you don't raise your voice. You remind them why you can't be ignored." The words hit hard. Claire Donnelly nods slowly, already replaying them in her mind, etching them into memory like a personal note to carry forward. Eventually, the plane lifts off again, smooth, steady, as if nothing ever happened. But everyone in that cabin knows better. They know they were part of something that doesn't happen every day. A moment they'll retell in quiet conversations and long layovers. A story about the man in seat 2A who didn't raise his voice, didn't make a scene, but still made the whole plane stop and listen. As the city lights fall behind them for the second time, Marcus Ellison leans back in his seat. He closes his eyes, not in victory, not in smugness, but in something deeper. Peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stand your ground without stepping on anyone else. The kind that says, "I know who I am. I know what I'm worth. And I don't need your permission to belong." And maybe, just maybe, that one young boy in 3C will carry this moment longer than he realizes. Maybe he'll remember that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it just stands still. And that's the story of Marcus Ellison, the CEO who didn't demand respect, but reminded everyone what it looks like. Everyone on that plane saw it. Maybe now we've seen it too. Because respect? It doesn't come with a first-class ticket. It doesn't wear a suit. It doesn't need credentials. It's simple. Treat people right the first time, because you never know who you're speaking to. And whether you're sitting in 2A or 32B, never forget, dignity isn't given. It's lived. And no one can take it from you, unless you let them. Thank you for watching. Subscribe me and hit the notification bell to not miss new stories. Bye.